What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Touchline Talk Show. We finally have Champions League group stage games to talk about. We're going to run through some of the most notable results from match day one here, and then in segment two, we're going to get into some of the other games I want to highlight, as well as the managerial changes that have happened in light of Tuesday's action, both at Chelsea and RB Leipzig. So you can go find that video on the YouTube page as well. But we start with the action itself, and we're starting with what Napoli did to Liverpool. This was the most surprising result, probably. Maybe you could argue Chelsea Dynamo Zagreb. But of the marquee games, and I really feel like there are three of them, we're going to talk about all three here. This is the one that is the most interesting, most noteworthy for a couple different reasons. And it just plays into the struggles Liverpool have been having so far this season. The right side of that Liverpool defense was an absolute disaster. Joe Gomez made multiple high-profile mistakes. Trent Alexander-Arnold's defensive struggles have been well documented, and now Jurgen Klopp is bringing him off in games they're trailing. Not necessarily this one, but in general in the Premier League, that doesn't make sense to me either. This is individual mistakes from the back line. This is the same kind of stuff we saw when they stumbled over the line to get Champions League qualification, thanks in large part to Alisson scoring a goal. The other time they went through all of these injuries and didn't look like Liverpool. Napoli were up 3-0 at halftime, despite the fact they missed a penalty, the second one Liverpool conceded, and Virgil van Dijk clearing a ball off the line. It absolutely could have been and probably should have been 5-0 at halftime. Luis Diaz ultimately does get a goal back, but not until Napoli score right out of halftime to make it 4. It was every bit as bad as the result suggests, and then some. I mean, this was more in the vein of a 6-1 or a 5-0, something like that. And Liverpool have only had 2 losses in the group stage in the last 3 seasons. I talked about this in my preview that as much as Liverpool have been struggling and as vulnerable as they are, the place they get exploited is not the group stage of the Champions League. They might have a down game here or there, but this doesn't happen. And they're always there to top their group and to at least get into the knockout stage. Now, you had the exit against Atletico Madrid. Sometimes that part doesn't go perfectly. But they are not a team that struggles in the group stage. And so you pull this right after the Merseyside derby where you drop more points. There really just isn't too much new to say. It is the same issues, and it goes back to the same point I've been harping on. To me, this is all about failing to control games through the midfield, in part because of the injuries you've suffered there, and in part because this team just isn't playing well right now. But everything starts with the midfield and the high press, and being able to dictate the terms of games, and to let your players do what they do best. Virgil van Dijk can cover space and hold a high back line. Your 2 preferred center backs next to him are not playing for the most part right now, due to injuries and whatever else. Joel Matip did come into this game, but by that point it was over. And when you high press and you win the ball back up the field, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Andy Robertson don't have to defend as much. They're not going to get exploited the way they are right now, particularly Alexander-Arnold. And it's the big snowball effect. I've said this over and over and over. It all compiles and results in, instead of being able to highlight all of the strengths of this team, you're highlighting all of the weaknesses because Salah's not getting on the ball as much, the midfield isn't controlling and setting tempo, and the back line is just a mess and all over the place. It's the same story over and over again, and Napoli are good enough to exploit it. And very quietly, Napoli, but from a numbers standpoint, have been the best team in Serie A so far this season. I expected them to take a step back after what they lost this offseason. And They didn't bring in a bunch of high-profile replacements for Lorenzo Insigne and Kalidou Koulibaly, and you can go down the list. But there are still an awful lot of good players at this team. And you saw that today. Midfield was excellent. Osimhen was dangerous until he had to come off, and then Simeone came on and scored. They were just really, really good. And in the larger context of this, still not disastrous for Liverpool in terms of getting out of this group. That is a game you're okay losing when you look at the group stage. If you're going to say, we're not going to be perfect this year, we're just not in a position where we can expect to win every single group stage game, losing at Napoli is not a huge deal. However, this is, from top to bottom, the deepest group in the Champions League this season. Napoli certainly look like they're going to get out. They've got, and they just played one of their toughest games and passed with flying colors. And the third team in this group is Ajax, who, by the way, obliterated Rangers and look every bit as good as Ajax last season, which was my question coming in. Of they've completely overhauled their team and sold a bunch of really gifted players. Can they get to that same level? The answer appears to be yes. Now, it's still early and it was Rangers, but they were excellent in matchday 1. And so all of a sudden, it's not panic time in terms of the group stage and Liverpool's Champions League run. But your margin of error is really slim now. Because Rangers is the fourth team in this group, and to me, they're the best, quote-unquote, worst team you could have had. Ajax are one of the most dangerous, quote-unquote, third teams, and you just got your doors blown off by Napoli. There is absolutely a world in which Liverpool do not get out of this group. They have plenty of time and the fixtures left to take care of business and at the very least finish second, but certainly if they beat Napoli at home and do what they're supposed to, they'll still probably win this group. But this is happening way too often for me to write it off and say, oh, it's Liverpool, they'll figure it out. I still think they will figure it out eventually, but I'm not convinced they're going to figure it out in time. They have a chance to, but this is not something you fix overnight. And we'll see when they actually have their full squad back and if they can actually keep their full squad healthy. Because you're awful reliant on a specific group of players to make this whole thing work. That's really what we've learned here, I feel like. It was Van Dijk. Now Thiago is part of that conversation. That if you lose one of those 3, 4, 5 guys that are the most valuable players, most important players on this team, all of a sudden they are nowhere near the best teams in the world. And to Napoli's credit, they came in, exploited it, were absolutely brilliant, and are off to a really, really good start this season. I really thought they had a shot to win Serie A last season the way they were playing, and I didn't think they got the love they deserved because they were in the Europa League. They did tail off at the end and weren't really a factor by the final few weeks of the season. But the way these other Serie A teams are performing, you've got to consider them title contenders. And especially with what they just did to Liverpool. This group is fascinating to me, and Ajax is going to have something to say about this before it's all said and done. We are still way too early to start drawing grand proclamations. But my goodness, that was horrific from Liverpool. Your other big game on Wednesday, that second set of games, Bayern Munich go to Inter Milan, come away with an easy 2-0 victory. Inter had even less control of this game than they did in the Milan derby. And I talked about this on my 5 things from the week and going into this game sort of after the Milan derby. They just, anytime they play a good team this season, now it's 8-3 in games against Lazio, Bayern, and AC Milan. They've been outscored. 8-3. They simply cannot get a hold of these games and actually go toe-to-toe with the high-quality teams they're playing. And yes, not having Romelu Lukaku for these past 2 games is part of that. But he is not going to solve the biggest problems this team is facing right now. They're getting cut open consistently by the good teams they play. And they simply just don't have any foothold in the game. The midfield has to be much, much better. And yes, Lukaku's hold-up play, you could argue, is going to be beneficial in that aspect, sure. But they are running out of time really quickly here. Not Serie A, the way things are going, you can have a slow start because everybody's had a slow start and still recover and end up winning the league. But from a Champions League perspective, this game was vital for Inter. Because you still have Barcelona to deal with in this group, who looked really good. Take it with a grain of salt as Victoria Pilsen, but Lewandowski just getting another hat trick. So you've got Bayern at home. And you lost that one. Which means now you can only get to 9 points without picking up points at Bayern Munich or at Barcelona. And that's assuming you beat Barcelona when they come to the San Siro and you take all 6 points against Victoria Pilsen. I said it from Champions League preview. This was the team and the league I was looking at with the most to prove and the biggest question marks heading into this Champions League campaign. Can Serie A show up and actually go toe-to-toe with the best teams in the world? And the first part of that was Inter being competitive in this group. Because on paper, they are the third best team. And they sure looked like it in this game. Bayern, good response from dropping more points. I mean, they're outplaying every team in the Bundesliga, of course. But all of a sudden, they went from scoring 5 goals a game to scoring 1. Those past 2 games where they've dropped 4 points, those couple of draws, they were much better in this one. Leroy Sané puts them ahead, and that was kind of that. I mean, at least Inter had a surge at the end where they looked like they had a chance to equalize after Dzeko made it 3-2 against Inter Milan, or against AC Milan in the Milan derby. There was no surge in this game. Bayern just kind of coasted, added a second. Sané maybe should have gotten credit for it, but the shot looked off target to me. So it ended up being an own goal, but that was absolutely created by Bayern, and Sadio Mane was there to tip it in anyway. If it hadn't gone off D'Ambrosio and into the net. There's really not too much to say about Bayern. This game went about the way I thought it would. You could see this coming for Inter. They need to fix things, and they need to fix things fast, and in the Champions League, it might already be too late. This was a huge week for them, domestically and in Europe. And here they are with 3 losses to the 3 good teams they've played so far, and with all kinds of work to do to find a way to stay in the Champions League and avoid dropping down to the Europa League. And then finally, PSG, Juventus, your marquee game on Tuesday to kick off the group stage on match day 1. PSG completely took Juventus out of the game in the first half. Juve did not look like they were going to ever score a goal. Kylian Mbappe just made it look so easy. Those were brilliant finishes. He's so much fun to watch. It was more or less what you would expect when a Juventus team that's struggling, that Max Allegri doesn't seem to have a lot of faith in, goes to the Parc des Princes, and PSG is kind of firing on all cylinders. But then, here comes halftime. Weston McKennie gets on the field. He scores a goal. And Juve are much better after halftime. They actually start to get a little bit of a rhythm. They weren't incredibly close to finding a way to get a point, but they did look much livelier. They had a little bit of energy in the second half. So, at the end of the day, it's not a horrible individual result if you're Max Allegri. The bigger concern here is that, according to FB Ref and StatsBomb, which is where they get their XG data, Juventus are averaging exactly 1.0 expected goals in Serie A so far. Duhan Vlahovic has 4. One of them is a penalty, and 2 of them are free kicks. He's not getting all of these clear-cut opportunities in front of the net. This is officially a pattern, and you saw it for the most part in this game. I mean, McKinney got got the goal on a header, but it is a real struggle for Juventus to create quality chances right now. I was really high on this team based on what I saw the first couple weeks, and I'm willing to overlook a draw that you probably shouldn't have had when you're outplaying the other team and it just doesn't go your way for whatever reason. But this has become a thing. And PSG are quite simply the better team right now. And there isn't too much to say on this from the PSG side for me. Mbappe could have had a hat trick. You would have liked for them to see this game out a little bit more convincingly and really finish it for 90 minutes. But they're going to win this group. They're clearly the best team in this group. The question becomes, as it always is, what do they do when you get deeper into this competition? So those are your 3 marquee games. Like I said, apologies for not being able to go live due to the technical difficulties. So be sure to hit that subscribe button once you're done with this video. And then for more Champions League reaction and my thoughts on the managerial changes we saw at Chelsea and RB Leipzig, be sure to check the YouTube page for that video.